I now have the opportunity and delighted to introduce our final panel for this afternoon. And the panel is titled Views from the Hill. And I'm excited about this panel because it's a hybrid. On the one hand, you've heard from members today on both sides of the aisle. This is an opportunity to hear in part from members of their staff. And anyone who's been on the Hill knows it's the staff run the place. And their hard work, without it, this movement, this coalition, this progress on employee ownership wouldn't be possible. So on the staff front, I'm thrilled to welcome Sarah Mashevitz, who's the pension counsel for the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, known as the HELP Committee, for Ranking Member Bernie Sanders. Joining Sarah is Cassie Brzezinski, who the senator called out, who's a policy advisor in Senator Van Hollen's office. And on the House side, Andrew Mansell, legislative assistant for Congressman Moore. These three staff members are joined by two experts and tenured members of the ESOP and employee ownership community. As I understand, both are former staffers as well, so they know where all the bodies are buried, which is good for this conversation. Very excited to welcome my colleague Greg Facciano, Vice President of Government Affairs and Public Relations at the ESOP Association, and Ike Brannon, the President of Capital Policy Analytics, Senior Fellow at the Jack Kemp Foundation. And with that, Ike, I will hand the mic over to you.
Great. Hey, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. When my first job in the Capitol was working for the Joint Economic Committee, and my office was literally on the other side of those doors. And the great thing about that, depending on your age, is that all the leftover food from every event here was rolled over there. So it was a boon for the interns and a curse for the rest of us. I became interested in ESOPs back when I was finishing up my graduate degree in economics at Indiana University, when I was a research assistant for Ben Craig at Indiana University and John Pencavel. Congressman Van Hollen referred to a number of studies talking about how ESOPs and employee-owned organizations seem to have better productivity. That all stems from the series of seminal research that Pencavel and Craig did. The fundamental question of economics: does it matter who owns your desk? Are you more productive if it's owned by the Defense Department, General Dynamics, or if owned by yourself? And this question was put forth by Joseph Schumpeter almost a century ago. And I think a lot of us have said intuitively we know what the answer is, but our intuition has gone various different ways. And so what Pencavel and Craig did is they got data from many lumber mills in the Pacific Northwest in the early 1990s. And in that universe, there were a lot of corporate-owned lumber mills. There were a lot of sole proprietor lumber mills, and there were a lot of employee-owned ESOPs lumber mills. And so the question is, what is more productive? And they came up with the answer that Senator Van Hollen knows, right? That holding forth everything else constant, they tend to be employee-owned lumber mills were much more productive. It matters quite a bit, it turns out, for the motivation of people to have a little stake in the ownership, and it goes far. And economists have always said this thing: well, it shouldn't matter all that much. If you work harder, you get a very small incremental increase if you do something that makes your company more productive. But it matters a lot more than that, right? There's something innate about an employee-owned company that boosts productivity. Fast forward 15 years, I'm from a small town in downstate Illinois, where the local bank, where I've been a shareholder since I was 6 years old, and one of my grandparents died and left me $300 worth of stock in this bank. The bank became an ESOP S Corp back in 2001, and being the only person associated with the bank that has a PhD in economics, I've done a lot of things for the bank over this time. The bank's nearly, it's not a small independent bank anymore. It's almost $10 billion worth of deposits. And what I really enjoy going back, and I'm back still seeing my mom 3 or 4 times a year, and I always stop by the bank, is the the president takes me through to meet all the millionaires who work as tellers at our hometown bank. But the reason one of the reasons I've been going back home a lot the last year and a half isn't just that I miss my mom. I do, but the president of the ESOP, the guy who founded it, passed away, and it's made things really complicated trying to make sure that everything operates like it should, that our new ESOP isn't breaking any rules, that everything is adhering to. And so it's been a big administrative chore. And, I'm just an economist. I'm not an accounting expert, but like more than once, like I've been the guy who has to figure out the right person to talk to in Washington, D.C. to make sure that we're not stepping over any lines and that we're going to blow this thing up, right? So it's way, way more difficult to not just to start an ESOP, but also to keep these things going. And so anything we can do in that regard would be really beneficial, since we know how much better they are at inducing productivity and effort and reducing attrition and quits from other places. So that's where I'm coming from. And when I was on the Hill, I worked for two Utah members, actually, Senator Robert F. Bennett from Utah and Senator Hatch, who was, of course, chair of the Finance Committee. And Senator Hatch was very motivated by ESOPs and S corporations. And what he would do every Congress is he would get a whole bunch of people together and ask what 10 things could be done to make the life of an ESOP better. And he would carry this list with him every time we went into any meeting of the Senate Finance Committee or a conference committee or anything. And if they needed his vote and he saw he had a modicum of leverage, he would pull out this list and look for something he could ask. And he would go down this list. And I was talking to Sarah before this, like back in the day, there were actually conference committees and people would actually get things done, and they do things on a bipartisan basis. So it's kind of disappeared a little bit. But Senator Bennett, whether we were in the majority, was dogged about trying to make things easier for ESOP. So I guess my first question mainly for Cassie and Sarah. So what is the state of play right now? What's going on in the Help Committee, Commerce Committee? Like, is there a chance that we're going to do something to improve the life of ESOPs this year?
Sure. Is this on? Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. The first thing I'm going to say is it sounds like we just need you back in congressional staff. If we were getting things done back then, and we can get things done now. So I have to give the obligatory, I'm a staffer, I don't speak for the senator, these are my opinions, I'll do it for all three of us. There we go. Now we've got the worst part out of the way. Now to the fun part, which is I don't think that you probably have ever heard a Bernie Sanders staffer quote Ronald Reagan, but that's what I'm going to do. So in a 1987 speech, President Ronald Reagan was quoted as saying the following: "I can't help but believe that in the future we will see in the United States and throughout the Western world an increasing trend toward the next logical step, employee ownership. It's a path that befits a free people." So I know you've heard this over and over again today, but let me be the 100th person to say to you that this is a wonderful bipartisan issue. We are thrilled to be working on it. It is one of the top priorities for Senator Sanders in the committee, but at large, we believe that it's one of the most important things that you can do on behalf of working people across the country. And we have a huge ESOP community in Vermont. In fact, we have 40 Vermont-based ESOPs. That's about 5,000 workers throughout the state. I only mention this because, like, as a percentage, Senator Van Hollen, I don't know, we're catching up in Vermont. So, but the question was on the state of play, right? And so you've heard several tidbits today about tariffs, about reconciliation, and how things are not going so well in those arenas. But what I will say to you is that retirement is the exception to the rule, I think, on those types of issues. I think that there is still a lot of bipartisanship, as you see in this room and on this panel even, about retirement issues. And so although things do not move quickly in Congress, my good news for you is that I think that there are several points of agreement in this space and remain so, even in such an acrimonious environment. So as most of you know, the Work Act was passed as a part of Secure 2. And as a part of that, we got Hillary at the Department of Labor There you are. Wonderful. Great. We're glad to hear. It's a little more awkward with you in the room, but you were gone and now you're back and we're thrilled. I, so if you don't know Hillary, please go talk to her. So that's number one, right? And we're going to continue to work with DOL where we can. Obviously, there's a lot of career staff that remain at DOL who are wonderful. There's a lot of politicals as well. We're having in our conversations that we have with the political staff as we go through these nomination processes, we're asking them about ESOPs and making sure that they're aware and making sure that this is a project that they want to work on at the department with Hillary. So second, I will mention that the continuing resolution that was passed in March did not have the funding we had hoped. There was a conversation about $2 million in funding for employee ownership grants to state centers, and unfortunately that was excluded from the CR. There have not been a lot of opportunities for new monies, but the senator is a champion of that and continues to ask for it doggedly, and you can expect that to continue going forward. I'll also briefly mention the adequate consideration rule. I did not get to stay all day, but I'm guessing that came up. We were thrilled that it came out after decades of waiting. Less thrilled that it immediately got rescinded, and not for in my read of this, again, personally, my read is that it wasn't because of substance. It was because of process. So I think one of the things that we can do as staffers is keep an eye on those processes where we can continue to push things forward that is not political, to make sure that we continue to work on this rule, because from our perspective, right, it's important for both the owners and the employees who become both. And we want to make sure that, that businesses have the surety that they need to be able to go through these processes, and that workers get the benefit of ESOPs in general. Hopefully everybody's okay back there. And then lastly, and I think this leads pretty well into what the work that you're doing for the senator is, we're working on a new version of the Employee Ownership Bank Act, which would give $500 million in low interest rate loans to help workers purchase businesses. So we are not as far along as Senator Van Hollen, unfortunately for you, fortunately for me, because I have a little more time to introduce the bill. So anyone who's interested in that idea or any other ideas, please, we're always, our door's always open, and we love to learn from you guys on the ground every day. And I'll pass it to you.
Very well said. I could not have said any of this better myself. And just wanted to build on what Sarah said about just the legislation that you're working on. I think these can be very complementary. And it really points to the fact that there is growing support across the Hill, across multiple caucuses, different members on both sides of the aisle, and along the political spectrum. There's a lot of support for employee ownership and for the ESOP model, as well as the cooperative model, and just in general, all shared models of shared ownership. As my boss mentioned, of course, we're working on our legislation that would it would be very nice to have these two both be introduced, both pass, and we could see an array of financing options available for firms that are looking to transition to an ESOP model or something similar. But of course, we're working on our legislation, which will hopefully be out very soon, which would provide a zero subsidy credit facility for commerce to basically provide the full faith and credit of the U.S. government for ownership investment companies and small companies that are looking to getting into financing ESOP transitions, for them to be able to have that backing. So that way there would be a broader array of financing options. There would be a mentor protege program similar to the Small Business Investment Act, and we would just be able to provide those guardrails and a lower cost of credit for that to be an option. And hopefully, between these two bills, it would be very nice to be able to have these options so that firms don't feel inadvertently forced into, selling to private equity or just, going public. Not that that's necessarily a viable option these days. Like, it's getting very challenging to enter the public markets, and that's a whole different discussion. But it's gotten hard for succession planning to be viable and be worker forward. So I'm hoping that this will continue to percolate throughout the Hill, and that we'll continue to see a lot of support on all sides of the aisle for efforts like this. I'm very heartened by the fact that, we've had such strong support from Republicans and from, Democrats, and that there doesn't seem to be any sort of, political toxicity, knock on wood. We should all knock on wood after I say that. But there doesn't seem to be any political toxicity with this. And it's amazing to see such broad support from, a lot of these committee chairs. We feel good about the finance committee leads. Wyden and Crapo seem to be allies in our corner. And so we're very excited to just see this momentum continue to build. And I would just add one more thing, I'm sorry, but I think it's really unique that this issue sits at a very unique nexus when it comes to policy issues, because we have, obviously as Democrats, we're very, pro-worker. A lot of our Republican friends are too. A lot of people are pro-worker, but this is also an onshoring effort, right? I mean, a lot of folks have probably mentioned that today, so I'm not going to be a broken record, but there are benefits that that can really speak to the current administration as well as the last administration. And so this is a very unique issue that we can really message on both sides of the aisle.
Well, one thing I thought that was really important that Sarah brought up is that there have been a lot of action in a bipartisan way on issues related to saving, right? Secure Act 2.0 passed, and it really pushed the ball forward in terms of making it easier for people to save for retirement. And so that is the one thing that I think that heartens me a lot, that there is a possible route to get something like this done. So let me just throw this out to the gentleman here. What is going on the regulatory front? So we know that the rules that got issued at the end of the Biden administration have been withdrawn, but do we see any hope that stuff might be going on in the next year or two? I know we have an EBSA administrator name, but not confirmed. So
happy to jump on that grenade. Greg Fasciano with the ESOP Association. After, as Jack referenced, after a 25-year career on Capitol Hill, I jokingly tell people, my father I got a political science degree. He called it BS and BS. What are you going to do with that? So went to Capitol Hill, and after 25 years, I got time off for good behavior. And so there is hope on the other side, staffers. But we work very hard as a 501c6. We educate. We do all kinds of stuff. We do a lot of advocacy work, lobbying, and other things with all of that. And we work particularly hard in this regulatory issue because of the salience of it for ESOPs and the future of the ESOP community. Why does this matter? Why was it so important to get in the Work Act, which was a result of a lot of hard work, including from people sitting here? The regulatory uncertainty, which, by the way, goes beyond just adequate consideration. There's other things here about the aggressive and long-standing investigatory tactics by EBSA. And yes, Aronowitz has been nominated but not yet confirmed. They're kind of waiting through that process. There's also resistance from DOL about FOIA and some secretive practices there, specifically about common interest agreements, which I'm happy to touch on as well. But we know when it comes to why is this such an issue? Why is it so important to ESOPs today and the future? It's a quantifiable problem. It's not just our assertion. It's not just something we think is an issue. It's not something that these folks recognize because they've spent so much time wading through ESOP issues, thankfully. We know from a 2021 Pepperdine Cost of Capital survey that there's major concern among business owners when it comes to becoming an ESOP. They see the government intrusion or oversight of this as an issue and the uncertainty that surrounds it. We've quantified that with 2024 study and research that we did with focus groups and business owners and others. It is, like I said, deeply quantifiable and qualitative research on that too. So what do we mean? Why is this? What was this regulatory certainty? Unpack that for a second. Trustees, with ESOPs specifically, trustees need certainty to know when they've acted in good faith. The law talks about this, ERISA talks about this, but they need certainty to know what is good faith, and ERISA doesn't have that now. DOL has never instituted these regulations in 50 years. On the other side of that, business owners need confidence that they're doing things correctly, and they're not going to be second-guessed by the government. That's a huge problem. It causes this injection of uncertainty, and folks look at another offer, strategic competitor, private equity, any other financing option, which some of the finance bills that are being contemplated kind of try to get around. We've got a lot of thoughts about what that looks like. We put out a proposed rule, what we think. There's a variety of things there. Encourage you to take a look at that. But I think it's important from a 30,000-foot level to remember, the parties at the point of a negotiation, the inertia is to get a deal. The employees don't own a thing until a deal is done. We can't get all the benefits, the positive things we've all been talking about, everyone in the room acknowledges, we all know about, until a deal is done. And the deals don't get done when there's this tremendous uncertainty. And the deals don't get done unless there's regulatory clarity. And the deals don't get done if a business owner looks at this and says the DOL can come in here and second guess me years after the fact. And so clearing out this underbrush is so incredibly important. And it seems at times that our own Department of Labor has actually been hostile to ESOPs and arguably even hostile to other forms of retirement. Defined benefit pensions and other things are going away. It seems like the only thing they like is 401ks, which certainly not bad, but it kind of feels like we've been, injured on this. So the effect of all of this is it's denying millions of American workers the chance at ownership.
So, Matt, I just have one thing I want to add is, I've got a bunch of side gigs. One of it, I run this very small nonprofit called the Savings and Retirement Foundation. And mainly what we do is we have seminars every other week for people who are scholars who do research on issues related to savings and retirement. And so most of our participants work for the federal government. So we have some people from Ways and Means, Congressional Budget Office, Joint Community Taxation, U.S. Treasury, and EBSA. A bunch of people come from EBSA. And I've said several times, we would love to have somebody come and give a talk on ESOPs or S-Corps. And they said, there's no such person. Nobody is really doing a lot of research there. They have a research staff. They're doing some interesting work on labor market issues related to savings, but they could never tell me, oh, yeah, there's a whole team that thinks about this stuff, and that's a big gap.
I would suggest two things. One, the folks who work so hard to get the Work Act put in place, part of that establishment of the Employee Ownership Initiative was to get a body in the Department of Labor who understands, looking at you, Hillary, who understands the positives of employee ownership and can be in the building. So when the Secretary of Labor says, someone needs to tell me about this ESOP thing, who do we have in the building? Instead of calling an EBSA investigator, they can call an Employee Ownership Initiative director and have a positive view instead of a negative view. The second thing, not my words, theirs, you can go to the released adequate consideration rule that EBSA did. Now, it's pulled from their website, but you can find it on ours. We warehoused it. You can read their preamble, which is very lengthy and extensive. You can see exactly what EBSA thinks of ESOPs. And I'm just going to, spoiler alert, it's not good. It's very hostile. It's very hostile. So EBSA's cards are on the table, and there has to be a sea change there. And that's part of the reason this regulatory uncertainty, we have to address that. And thanks to the supporters that we have, do that.
Yeah, that's great. I would, Andrew Mansell with Congressman Moore's office. I think that's a good characterization. There's a lot of, worst case skepticism, best case lack of interest, don't know anything regarding ESOPs in the regulatory space. We saw that last Congress as we were working on the EEIA. At best, again, disinterest from SBA, and that's one of the reasons, among others, that we wanted to make our transition, like the senator alluded to putting this facility in the Commerce Department, where we think there's a lot more openness, and it makes more sense in terms of a supply chain standpoint to have it exist over there. Congressman Moore mentioned we had Mr. Phillips as our co-lead last go-around. We've got Lori Trahan from Massachusetts as our new partner in the House. She's an ENC member, great team. And so we're really excited to get this out in the next few weeks, like Cassie was saying. I think it's from that commerce standpoint, I think it's really great to look at this in terms of the tariff environment and our supply chain resilience, as people have been talking about. ESOPs should be seen as a really valuable tool to keep businesses onshored. And so the more we can position it kind of from that lens, saying like, hey, let's we're purists. We like employee ownership, but we also like to see this as one of many arrows in our quiver of tools to keep businesses domestic owned, American owned. We run great risk in the foreign M&A market for losing IP to foreign states, bad actors. A lot of Chinese firms in particular are interested in buying up American businesses. We're seeing fewer mom and pop shops being passed down generation, larger businesses too. And so that's another reason we've expanded the scope of the bill as well, to be able to serve a larger breadth of businesses. And so this is going to be a really great opportunity. I think as people get more familiar with the concept, I think once people get to know it, we find very little opposition. It's just kind of still a foreign, relatively new thing to most minds out here. So as we shop it around, we've gotten really positive results, and we've got members queued up who want to join in on the project. And so I think we're in a really good position, and I think a great opportunity to ride the wave.
So Andrew brings up a really interesting point, and I think Cassie alluded to this, and so did her boss. What I find really interesting about this, we got someone from HELP, we have Ways and Means, we're talking about commerce, is that the jurisdiction really matters for the success of this bill, right? And it can go almost anywhere, right? So I was with Hatch. Hatch saw this as a finance committee issue. I spent a couple years at ENC, and at the time, my boss thought it was an ENC issue. This could go technically all over the place. So maybe everyone can just say for a minute, Andrew, start with you, like help everyone out to understand about this jurisdictional issue and why that seems to matter so much.
Well, we'd love to have it in Ways. We think that'd be great. But I think you do need to have sympathetic jurisdiction. A little bit of buy-in goes a long way. So that's why I think the idea of the Commerce Department makes the most sense, because they're the ones with jurisdiction over this, supply chain space. We've been having some back and forth, and I'm not. We're ironing out where we'll be referred to in the House, certainly. But that's what makes sense to me.
Sure. I'm always happy to participate in a jurisdictional cage match any day of the week. Now, this is very, very deeply inside the Beltway stuff. So for those of you who are not around here, congratulations for not being around here, but also I'm sorry. Look, we first and foremost, we are also now on finance. So if finance wants to take it, I mean, we're certainly interested in that. And so is actually Senator Cassidy. So you've got the chair and the ranking member of HELP who sit on both HELP and finance. And so in our experience on the Senate side, there's a lot of bills that cross over between both finance and HELP. The thing that makes HELP jurisdiction very unique, though, is the DOL piece, right? So we have jurisdiction over DOL related things. And so whether that's Aronowitz's nomination, and the hearing on that, or adequate consideration, those kinds of pieces that are DLL related are more in the HELP space. But we are certainly more than willing and happy to work across jurisdictional lines.
Well, what I thought was really interesting is in 2017, the EBS administrator was, of course, Preston Rutledge, who was a colleague of mine came from the Senate Finance Committee. And so Preston was a big fan, I think, of ESOP. There were probably 4 other things he liked, but he really understood it. But I think it made it kind of difficult, again, because everyone at finance thinks everything has to do with taxes, and so they should just basically do everything. And I think he's kind of struggled with that, and he came from, we used to have at Treasury and all that. So I'm sorry, Cassie, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I mean, this remains an ongoing question for us as well. That's, I guess, one of the more interesting factors when you're looking at such a dynamic issue that touches on so many different aspects of what we do on the Hill. So I think we've been in conversations with the parliamentarian about our bill, and the parliamentarians on both House and Senate. And so it might, we've heard finance, we've also, had a few comments about banking potentially, which I don't, although Senator Van Hollen does sit on banking, we don't necessarily quite see that being the number 1 committee for us. But we've
Clearly everybody wants us. This is great.
I know, right? This is true. And then Commerce, obviously, we've been in touch with Commerce and the Cantwell team last Congress.
Just help.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
I know. I mean, at this point, why not? Let's go for gold. But no, I think it's definitely a unique topic for that. But right now, we're looking at finance. I think we're keeping an open mind between finance, commerce, also HELP. I think there could be a lot of tangential opportunity for us to figure that out. So it remains an open question.
Great. So we just have a couple minutes left. Maybe we'll do a question, but Greg, I just want to give you the last word if there's anything you want to throw in here.
Sure, thanks. I appreciate it. I alluded to something, so I'll just come back to that, just so I don't leave a hanging Chad for those of you who are around 2000. A couple other things from Capitol Hill perspective that are being looked at. that I think it should be interesting for the ESOP community should be interested in. One, common interest agreements and kind of EBSA tactics. There have been letters from the past and current chair of the House Ed and Workforce Committee about some of EBSA's investigatory tactics, leaving investigations open for 4+ years. There's appropriations language about this to try to get this stuff. Prior DOL was very resistant to some of the oversight attempts from the prior chairman, the new chairman, Tim Walberg, who's both the prior chair, Virginia Fox, and the current Tim Walberg of Michigan, very positive on ESOPs, very supportive. So they've been promoting this and trying to look and get under the hood here and see what's going on in EBSA and get some of that data, which is, again, that regulatory underbrush I talked about. But one of the things that's popped up in the last, say, 90 days has been these common interest agreements. And this should be a little shocking. This is where the secret agreement between the Department of Labor and plaintiffs' firms are where information is gathered outside of due process on ESOPs, and it is shared with plaintiffs' firms who don't even have a plaintiff yet. They don't even have a client yet. It's basically the government paying for the fishing expedition for class action lawsuits. Now, if you don't think that has a chilling effect on ESOPs or someone considering an ESOP or employee ownership, it's shocking. And DOL has done this against ESOPs. Again, this is subject to congressional issue, congressional oversight being looked at. Every retirement plan is concerned, in and outside of the ESOP world. There's also a case, Cornell-Cunningham, which if you're not familiar with that, you should keep an eye on that. It's been argued at the Supreme Court. We're awaiting a decision. And that has to do with pleading standards. There was an amicus brief released by the Chamber of Commerce, which talked about ESOPs about a dozen times. In the first 24 pages, you don't have to read it all unless you're an insomniac. But the first couple pages will make your toes curl in terms of how it explains that and again, the DOL supported the plaintiff's bar position on this, the explosion of class action lawsuits that could be born out of this case. And so there's a real concern here. So this whole swirl of investigatory legal issues coupled with the regulatory underbrush, it's just a bad scenario that we're trying to really unpack and unwind, and reaching out and leaning with our congressional champions to try to do.
Which is why safe harbor provision is just so important.
Well, it would be if they wrote a good one. Yeah. The safe harbor provision they wrote when they released it on their own motion, by their own admission, was such a high standard. We sat in a room full of, we have a professionals forum of ESOP professionals, 400 plus, almost 450 ESOP professionals. Not one said that it's a good regulation. A safe harbor would be a good one if they did it right, to your point. But the one that they've released is such a high standard that even its existence, which sets an unattainable bar, would open the door to plaintiffs' attorneys because, well, look at all these transactions. We told you we told the court what a good transaction looks like, but this didn't meet that. So we must have suspicion and look into it. So they've set such a high bar with what they released. We actually want that one killed. If they want to come back and talk about it, maybe. But right now, the one they released is concerning.
Okay. Well, Greg, thank you so much for that. And I'd like to thank the rest of my panelists for a really interesting 45 minutes. Thank you very much.